Welcome to another edition of Hey Bobby with Senior VP of the Cleveland Guardians, Bobby DiBiasio, brought to you by J.W. Dodano Electric. I'm Ray Horner, and each and every week, Bobby takes time out of his schedule to join us, talk about our Guardians, the history, and everything about baseball. We have some enjoyable conversations available for you on our Facebook page, YouTube channel, and of course, WAKR.net and WAKR Radio, where we are. Bobby, I was thinking about this over the weekend. Is we talk often about those teams of the 90s and the batting lineup, as we should. I mean, All-Stars top 1 to 9. I mean, our 9-hitter hit like 30 home runs. It was unbelievable. But something that's understated, I think, with those teams, 95 right up until 2000 or so, was the pitching that we had as well. That's how you win a lot of ball games, is you get good pitching to go with the hitting. And sometimes they don't get their just due. And I thought maybe you could talk a little bit about the pitching of those teams from the 90s.
Well, you're so right, Ray. When you do think about the teams of the 90s, first thing that comes to mind is the powerful bats, of Albert Bell and Jim Thome and Manny Ramirez, and then how Carlos Baerga and Kenny Lofton and Omar could be such sweet swingers of the baseball bat. Sandy Alomar batting ninth, hitting 299 or something like that. But you're absolutely right. That pitching staff was much better than people give it credit for. It was a mix of farm system guys and some shrewd trades and a couple incredible free agent signings. Charlie Nagy, a first-round pick in 1988 out of the University of Connecticut. Paul Shuey, a number 1 draft pick out of North Carolina. Chad OJ out of LSU as a number 2 pick. And then you add Dennis Martinez and Oral Hershiser and Paul Assenmacher, and you get a trade of Eric Plunk. And even Julian Tavares in 95 comes along and sets a rookie reliever record and wins 10 games in 95 for us. People forget that 95 team that went 144 in 144 shortened game season, our pitching staff was number 1 in the American League with the lowest ERA at 3.38. We led the league with 4 shutouts. We led the league with 50 saves. We had the fewest walks and were 3rd in strikeouts, led by Charlie Nagy, who won 16 games. Oral Hershiser comes along and wins 16 for us as well. Dennis Martinez wins 12. Our old friend Mark Clark won 9. Chad OJ chipped in with 8. And then the Eric Plunk, Paul Assenmacher, righty, lefty. People forget Eric Plunk was pretty darn good for us. And Paul Assenmacher would just lay out in the bullpen and wait to face Mo Vaughn or Ken Griffey Jr. or Tino Martinez, whatever big lefty late in the game was up with some situation that was important. Grover would always go to him, and for the most part, Mr. Assenmacher did his duty, a lefty on left matchup, and do his thing. Even in 95, Bud Black's on that baseball team, and Jimmy Poole was on that team. And then when you move into the 97 era, Mike Jackson showed up to be with Jose Mesa. You can't forget about Jose Mesa. I know everybody identifies one game, unfortunately, Game 7 and 97 of the World Series, but here's a guy that mid-March, we had no idea who was going to be the closer for this baseball team in 94, 95, and they decided to give Jose Mesa a chance, and boom, he blossoms in one of the best and is one of our all-time saves leaders, along with top 10 in our franchise history with Mike Jackson. And Mike comes along and just does, an incredible job in our bullpen. But Charlie Nagy doesn't get enough credit, I don't believe, for being one of the studs of that group. He ranks 10th all time in our franchise history with 129 wins, and our pitching is pretty rich. So you're dealing with some Hall of Famers that you're going up against, and he's 8th in strikeouts. So I don't think Charlie gets enough credit on our team.
You mentioned Dennis Martinez, and I wanted to bring him up because looking at that team, when we acquired Dennis Martinez, as fans, you take a step back and you go, we mean business. Because you brought Dennis Martinez, who at that time, a lot of people might forget, was a stud on the mound. And we brought Dennis Martinez to this team. I thought that was a huge acquisition, Bobby, by the team.
One of the all-time great press conferences we ever had. We did it in the new Key Tower, the Society back then, Society Tower that Dick Jacobs built, where the Marriott downtown at Key Tower resides. On one of the top floors, they had a little amphitheater conference center. I think we might have been the very first ever event up on that. I think it was the 29th floor or 67th floor, whatever, at the very top, because from the windows you could look into Jacobs Field at that time. And Eddie Murray and Dennis Martinez were introduced on the same day, on the same press conference. And your statement about we mean business with this baseball team as we moved into a brand new baseball only beautiful urban ballpark. We thought we were building a team that could hit the ball. Now let's focus on getting a pitching staff. And to have Dennis Martinez and Oral Hershiser and Charlie Nagy be the leaders of that starting rotation, and then Chad OJ, who was such a big time pitcher. You know, he won the College World Series final game for LSU. So he was used to pitching in big time settings and doesn't get enough credit, as you say.
Mm-hmm. Senior VP with the Cleveland Guardians, Bobby DiBiasio, with us on WAKR. It is Hey Bobby, brought to you by JW Dodano Electric. Bobby, the other aspect I wanted to touch on is listening to the games this past weekend. And Hammy, I just happened to go back a little bit because I love the broadcast with Hammy, and I was reflecting a little bit on our good friend Mike Hegan. I had a chance, I know you much more than me, but having dinners with Mike out in Arizona for all those years in Goodyear when we would all get together, and the stories and the relationship with Hammy and Hegan behind the mic were just terrific radio. I go back and listen to it quite a bit, to be quite honest, as I appreciate the sportscasting side of the business, and thought maybe you could reflect a little bit on Mike and certainly what he meant maybe to you and to the organization.
Well, the fact that Mike grew up in Cleveland, grew up in Lakewood, was a St. Ignatius guy, went to Holy Cross, finished his college education at John Carroll. It meant something special that he was in the radio booth, having one of our own, calling the games, and how special. We all talk about how perfect alignment is that Tito's our skipper because his dad put on a Cleveland uniform. It was the same feeling with Mike because his dad, Mike's the son of a major leaguer, a 5-time All-Star, was with us during the 48 through 54 and beyond, a 17-year career as a big leaguer. Jim Hegan, he played 14 years in a Cleveland uniform, and those 14 years is when Mike was born and grew up. And some of the stories that Mike would share were pretty cool. One, because I played baseball when Edgewater Park had baseball fields right up against the lake in summer leagues, I can picture it vividly when he would talk about how his dad, again, a 5-time Major League All-Star, would throw him batting practice down at Edgewater Park. And how he'd grab a couple of his teammates at St. Ignatius when they were freshmen or sophomores, and in the fall, his dad would just take them all down there and throw BP to them. I mean, just imagine that. And then the other one that even I think tops it is, here's a kid who's 10 years old. Mike Hegan's 10 years old, and he's taken out of school for a little bit to be with the family in Tucson at High Corbett Field, with his dad being a member of the organization. And his mother and a couple of other wives, they all lived in this sort of the same apartment complex, and they would do barbecues and such. And some of the guest coaches back in the 40s or in the 50s were guys like Tris Speaker, Hall of Fame Tris Speaker, who was the player manager when we won the 1920 World Series, the Gray Eagle, one of the great players in baseball history. And here's Mike Hegan talk about his 8 to 10, 11-year-old kid would just sit and play catch with Tris Speaker in the backyard of these apartment complex when they did their barbecue. And he goes, oh yeah, guys like Hal Trotsky and Tris Speaker and them, they'd come in and out of spring training, and mom would have them over for dinner. And, I'd always end up playing catch with him. And it just, when I think about those things, and then the incredible day, I had to look it up to get the exact date, because you and I talked a little bit beforehand on the topics of the day. And July 18th, 1973, I wanted to make sure I had the date. Dick Williams is managing the Oakland A's. Mike's part of the first base platoon in Oakland. He was part of the 72 World Series team. Also was on the AL champ New York Yankees in '64, which is another funny story. But before the game on July 8th, 1973, Ray, Dick Williams goes up to Mike Hegan and says, hey, one of the broadcasters got ill. Take off your uniform and get up to the broadcast booth. And he's like, what? That's how you think of me, as a really valuable ball player here? But he does it because he had a broadcast background, because he worked for WTMJ TV in Milwaukee in the off season, because he was intrigued by broadcasting. So he worked on TV as a weekend sports anchor guy. And so they knew he had a broadcasting background. So he went up and did, I don't know, 3 to 5 innings or whatever, and then went back down. They called him back and said, you might pinch hit here today, so get your butt back down on the field and get back into uniform. So he did both, little broadcasting. I hate to say, I don't know if he got in for a pitch hit. I should have checked that out in the box score. We'll have to check on that one. Somebody could go to baseballreference.com, the greatest website in the history of the world, to go and see if he actually pinch hit that day. But there's so many stories connected to him. Like one of the funniest days in the booth with Hammy and Mike Hegan, the comedian Frank Caliendo comes into the booth to say hello. He's promoting an appearance at Hilarities at Pickwick and Frolic. And unbeknownst to me, as we're sitting waiting for him to go on, he then tells me quickly before going on, Mr. Hegan, I worked for Mr. Hegan. And I said, I don't understand. He goes, well, when Mike played for Milwaukee, he owned a batting cage. And as a little kid, I would go to the batting cage. And then when I got to junior high or high school, I worked there. So here's this famous comedian, Frank. So he walks down there and it's Mr. Hegan this and Mr. Hegan that. And the two of them or the three of them got rolling. And I don't think Hammy or Mike said a word during the whole inning that he was on. that Caliendo had all of us in the booth that day rolling on the floor. But think about that just such a small world in that regard. The guy was a 3-sport star at St. Ignatius, played 2 sports at a freshman football and baseball at Holy Cross, a Hall of Famer. You know, he's in the Greater Cleveland Sports Hall of Fame, St. Ignatius's Hall of Fame. Mike was such a terrific guy, but as you know, in your broadcasting career, there are those who have such an instinct and insight into the game that they call. You learn something every game from Mike Hegan.
I agree. And it was can't miss radio, in my opinion, with Hammy and Hegan in the booth. It's been Hey Bobby with Senior VP of the Cleveland Guardians, Bobby DiBiasio, brought to you by JW Dodano Electric. Bobby, as always, my friend, thank you for making time for us this week. We'll reconnect again next week, my friend. Thank you so much for the time.
Always fun, Ray. You take care, my friend. Go Guardians.